Today's Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Yomi test. Today's Shir for Erev Yom Tov Pesach has been generously sponsored by a very close friend of the Daf, L'Zecher Nishmas, his father, Rav Eliezer Moshe ben Shema, whose 50th yard site in Mirz Hashem will be on the second day of Pesach. The learning of the entire Chabura, Baruch Hashem, as we enter into such an incredible Yom Tov of Zman Chayruseinu, should bring Rav Eliezer Moshe ben Shema and raise him up to a higher place in Gan Eden Shalmayel. As well, it should bring a Zechus Yeshua and a Zechus Shidduch for his grandson Shema ben Chaya Mirz Hashem Bekarei Mamish. As well as the Zechus Shidduch for Chaim Dvar Tamisiv Bas Perel Rachel Shalom ben Levi Zava ben Teli Plum Yehudas Bas Asima Malka. As well as the Zechus for Shleim Shul Yisven ben Yerfei Shmo ben Tila Naftzali Mechles and Nachama Bas Viva Sarah Blum Bas Mindel Chaya Moshe Yeshua ben Malka. So yesterday we ran through the bottom of Lameches Amid Beis, and we finished off with the teretz of Abaya. And just to spend one moment explaining that case, you see in front of you Rabba's answer. We're trying to answer up a stira in the Mishnah, why in the Reisha they didn't argue, in the Sefer they did. And Rabba answered that both of them are referring to the Naflik Shehi Nisua. The Reisha is when she is alive, therefore she has a taina Vadai, and they have a taina Safik. It ain't Safik, it might be Dei Vadai. Whereas the Sefer is where she died, and therefore everyone's coming to inherit the Yachloiku. On this, the Gemara asked, does Abayu really concur with this rule of Ein Safik Maitzim Dei Vadai? Is that true? However, we learned in the Mishnah. Let's explain this case to the Mishnah. This is what we ran through at the end of the yesterday's Shir. The case is that Ruvain is nifter without any properties. His father does have properties. Reuven and his father, or Reuven as inheritors, both Rachmana litzlan were killed in a fallen building. And now we have a debate, who died first? If Reuven dies first, as you see over here, he does not inherit his father because his father was alive and he was nifter. And therefore, could the debtors, could he collect the ksuba from him? No, because he has no estate. Whereas if his father died first, then what happens? Reuven inherits his father. Then there is money with which those who Reuven owes money to collect his debts. That's the debate over here. And Beis Shammai says that in this case, Yachlaiku. So obviously Beis Shammai does not concur with the rule of Ein Safik Maitzim Dei Vadai. Answered the Gemara, Kasavri Beis Shammai, Shtar Oime Ligvais Ki Gavoi Dami, because there's a shtar, therefore it's going to be a different case. And we pick it up back into our Gemara over here on Lamed Chesed Beis, 4 lines from into the white lines, asks the Gemara, Umenat Teimra. And where do we know that Beis Shammai says Shtar Oime Ligvais is Kegavui Dami? The Tanam we learned to the Mishnah. Mesu by Aleim Ad Shaloi Shasu. This is the case of a Saita. If the husbands die before they have a chance to drink the Mei Saita, Beis Shammai tells Ksubasan Veinan Shaisis, they don't drink anymore, they take their Ksuba. Beis Hillel my Shaisis I like nightless Ksubasan. Either says the Beis Hillel, either they drink or they can't take their ksuba. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You meaning it sounds like they have a choice. Do you want to drink or not? But state in the Torah says the pasuk the pasuk says the man should bring his wife, and then what happens? Then they drink. But what do we see? It's only when the man brings his wife. In this case, is the man bringing his wife? Absolutely not, because he is no longer. So what does it mean, Veleka? What does it mean that he still has the option? That she, still has the options to drink. Ella explains the Gemara, you know what the price meant? Rather, what it meant is because, says Beis Hillel, she cannot drink, therefore she does not get her ksuba. Based off of this price, the Gemara articulates its raya. Safik zanai, safik loy zanai. In this case, we have a safik. We're not sure. Did she or did she not actually commit the crime? Was she mizana or not? If she was indeed mizana, she doesn't get a ksuba. If she was not, then she gets her ksuba. And yet, what do we see from this brisa? Safik zanei, safik loy zanei, because he's safik umaytzi midei vadai. And yet, what do we see? We see that even according to Beis Shammai, that the suffix gets from the body. How could that be? A suffix doesn't take from a vadai. Just like in our case, that's the reason why Beis Shammai says you're going to get the shtar. That is a raya to the way to learn Shitas Beis Shammai. Ask the Gemara, then Abaya should have asked from this Mishnah and Saita, because this Mishnah and Saita says very clearly, Shita's Abaya. Why were we going to find a far-fetched Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, Dilma Ksubas Isha Shaini. Maybe a Ksuba is different. Why? Mishum China. A very special rule about Ksuba is that the reason there was the whole invention of the Ksuba is we want people to be able to marry a woman. Let's see Rashi over here. Rashi explains that I can't find the Rashi here. No, here's Rashi. Rashi, 10 lines to the bottom. Rashi says, Vasam Leka. No, that's not the Rashi. No, it's not the Rashi. Hasam Leka Lemeimer Mishum China. The Hasam Misa Chashina Lechina. We're not worried about this concept of China. I cannot find the Rashi. Rashi, let's speak one more second. Where is Rashi? Rashi over here says that the Svara is Rashi's 3 lines above, excuse me. Rashi, he says, V'abayi la'achi la'yosvi miksuba dekasavar shining ksuba, why mishum china? Here it is. She'inoi sinchein be'enei anoshim. That's the critical line. We want women to be enticed, v'yitartzu li'nase, and be willing to get married, lefikach hechzikua misafik. Therefore, we gave it a chizik more than a safik. A special kula by a ksuba so that women feel protected, not vulnerable, and they'll be willing to get married. Ask the Gemara further, ksuva demas nisan. So why don't we ask? Why doesn't Abaya ask Rabbah from the case of ksuba from our Mishnah? Explains the Gemara, lo pligi. Beis Shammai doesn't argue with that case of the Mishnah. Says Gemara, really? V'loi? V'katani, what did our Mishnah say? Katani mesa ma yasa b'ksuba so b'nechas b'nechlas v'yotz mima. Beis Shammai like Yoshev al Yoshev. So what do we see very clearly? We see Beis Shammai in both cases argue. In the case of Ksuba, and in the last case of the Mishnah, explains the Gemara, a very unique way of reading the Mishnah. Achi Kamer, Mesa, Ma Yasa B'Ksubasa. If she dies first, what happens with the ksuba? Vishavka. And the Tana doesn't answer that kasha. Then the Tana goes to a new point. So explains the Gemara, fascinating, that Beis Shammai is not arguing about the case of ksuba. He's only arguing about the properties in which she brings in to the Mishnah. Excuse me, she brings into the marriage, not to the Mishnah. And Omer Ravashi, this was quite an interesting way of reading the Mishnah. Masnisa nami deka. Says Ravashi, don't be perturbed that this is a little bit odd, that you're putting a pause in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is really meduyak like this. Why? Dikatani, because the wording of the Mishnah was Yachloiku Yershi Abal im Yershi Av. The Yershim of the Baal split with Yershim of the Av, which we said refers to the Yershim of the woman. V'loikatani Yershi Av im Yershi Abal. It doesn't say that her Yarshim split with his Yarshim, which would be a way of saying that she is taking from him. Rather, it says that his Yarshim split with her Yarshim, holding into the detail that it's hers. Her properties, Shema Mina, says the Gemara, that is a raya. So far we've had 2 ways of answering up why in the Mishnah's Reisha there was no machlekes. We had Ula, we had a second way of Rabbah. Now says the Gemara, Abaye Amar, a third way of explaining the Mishnah, a third way of interpreting why in the Reisha there is no machlekes, and then in the Mishnah there is. Explains the Gemara, Reisha Donavlik Shishay Meres Yavam. The first case in the Mishnah was when she is a shemeres yavam, while she is awaiting the yavam to yibum, that is when she inherits properties. Seifa denavlik shitachta de baal, and the Seifa is talking about while her original husband was alive. That's the difference in the 2 cases. As we turn over to today's daf of Lamed Tes, explains the Gemara, because Savar Abaye yadai ki yada. Explains Abaye that his hand is like her hand, and therefore when the husband is alive, the din is going to be different. And Amar Le Rava, no. Then the Kuliyam Le Pligi the Yada Adifa Me Yada. If it fell to her while the husband is still alive, everyone agrees there's no machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. In that case, everyone's going to agree that he has a stronger right. It's adif from her. Ella says the Gemara, Rav has a new pshat, because says Rav Abaye, if you're right, if the husband's still alive, there would be no machlekes in that case. Ella Aidi V'Aidi D'Nav Like Shisha Meres Yavam, Reishat Lavid Ba Maimer, Seifa David Ba Maimer. A new way of explaining the chilik, the difference between the first and latter case of the Mishnah. Says Rava, the first case, this is the fourth way if we're keeping track. Says Rava, the first case she did Maimer, in the second case, in the first case she did not do Maimer, and therefore she's in her own Rishus entirely. Therefore, that which comes to her, she has full rights on. Whereas the Seifa, David Ba Maimer, that's when there's going to be a machlekes. Because of Rava, Maimer lebei Shammai, Oisavade Arusa b'Safik Nesua, and therefore what? Vade Arusa l'chayis b'tzara. That's the din of Maimer that we've spoken about many times. That Maimer has the ability to push away the tzara. V'Safik Nesua, that what? Lach like b'nechasim, that a property fell to her, she has the right to divide the properties with the Yavam. That is Shitas Abei Shammai. So that is the fourth way of learning the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa. And says the Gemara, these last two explanations of Abaye and Rava, it's from Mishmei Rav Elazar, Kavasei de Rava, it's from Mishmei Rav Yais, Rav Chlina, Kavasei de Abaye. We have a raya to each one. Ask the Gemara, really, Yomiyam Rav Elazar, Hachi, does Rav Elazar really say like you just suggested? Like Rava of Amar Rav Elazar, Maimer Lebei Shammai, you're right, he could have differentiated Maimer, yes, Maimer, no, but he learned all Maimer does is it pushes away the tzara and nothing more. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ebuch, you have to switch away the names. Eba Yisayim, another Pshat Leilam Loi Tebach, Amar L'cha Rav Elazar, Ki Amrina Anadol Tzagi La Beget, El Deboinami Chalitza. When did I say that you also need Chalitza? That's what I meant when I said that even after Maimer, there's still something there. Lach, like Benachasim, Loikanim Yamri, I never weighed in on the din of the Chasim, so explains the Gemara, the Rav Elazar could concur like we just suggested. The Rav Elazar could concur with our machlekes, and we do not have to ipuch, we do not have to switch it around. Amar Rav Papa, before let's just see the next few lines, then we'll see in the summary of the Daf Chayim. Amar Rav Papa, the Yukademas Nizak Kavasei da Abaye. Says Rav Papa, the wording fits better with Abaye. V'avkat the Kasha Mesa, and even though the latter case of the Mishnah is difficult, the case of Mesa, still the wording in the Mishnah says Rav Papa works with Abaye. The Katani, what does the Mishnah say? Nechasim and nechasim yotzim ima. My nechasim and my yotzim. What does it mean nechasim? What does it mean going out? Lav nechasim rishus abal, v'yotzim rishus abal rishus ha'av. Clearly that's what it means. V'afagav the kasha Mesa. The mifliki beguf alachar Mesa lifliku b'chayel peiros v'su loy miti. So let's just see over here. It says shows Daf Chayim. This is the kasha again. Shemeres Yevamos shlafel and nechasim. Why in the Reisha is there no machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? All the properties are 100% hers, whereas in the Seifa, Beis Shammai said Yachloike, Beis Hillel says their properties are made in the nechasim, in their ches kasan. So why in the Reisha is there no machlekes? In the Seifa there is a machlekes. Comes along Abaye. Abaye says the Reisha, she was a Shemeres Yavam. The Seifa, the husband was still alive, and that's in the Seifa. That's going to be the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, whether yada adifa me yada or whether it's going to be equal. Comes along Rav, and Rav says, I don't understand. If the husband's still alive, then he should have equal rights. Rather, comes along Rav, and Rav gives a way of explaining the chilik, the difference in the Mishnah in the Reisha and the Seifa. Says Rav, the difference is whether they did Maimer or not. Beis Hillel says Maimer is a din derabanan. Beis Shammai says no. Maimer even at some level works on a daraisa. It's a Safik Nesua which will help with regard to the properties. That's what Beis Shammai says. Yach loiku, and the Gemara pointed out that Beis Shammai is meduyak in the Mishnah. Now we Now we continue 10 lines from the white lines. Concise said in the Mishnah, if they get married, then they're 100% married. Explains the Gemara, so with regard to one halacha, this should sound familiar, hopefully. That you get divorced with a regular get, and you could get remarried. This, I think, is the third time we had this Gemara. Says the Gemara, Megarsha beget, Pshita, of course, they're husband and wife. Of course, you need a get. Explains the Gemara. No. I would have thought because says the Torah. You take her as a wife and you do yibum. Says the Torah, maybe the yibum teaches me there's still some status that you have yibum there. That what maybe even after yibum, you still need chalitza kamash malan machzira. Kamash malan that you get a get. Says the Gemara Vayter machzira pshita. It's also a pasha that after you get a get, if you want to get remarried, you could, just like any woman that one divorces. Explains the Gemara mitzvah de Rami Rachmana alei. The Torah gave him a mitzvah of yibum of the mitzvah de Rami Rachmana alei of the to do yibum hashta, but now take him like maybe you did yibum, but if you get divorced, it's over. Now you have the regular Isra Ishazach, it's your husband's wife. Maybe now you're not allowed to remarry her. Kamash Mlan, you can even remarry her. Says Gemara, wait, maybe your Havamina was correct. Maybe you can't remarry her after a get. That's the Josh of Lachla, the Ishta that you're 100% married. Continues the Gemara in the first line of Avot, just take Ksuba, that the one difference is, says the Gemara, that the original estate of the first husband is that which is obligated to pay the Ksuba. My Taima asks the Gemara, the reason is because he, the second husband, the one that did Yibam, never obligated himself. God made him get married to her. God made the situation of Yibam, and therefore, since he never made the kinyan of his own estate to her, it stays on the first husband. Says the Gemara, but let's say she never got a ksuba from the first husband, then they'll make him give the second from the second husband, so he can't divorce her with ease, which of course is the original enactment and purpose of the entire ksuba. And those are the ways in which she's ishtay l'chol davar. You need a get, and you could get remarried to her. The Havamina would be maybe the Isser comes back, Kamashblan it does not. The Havamina would be you need Chalitza, Kamashblan you could do get. And finally, that where does the Ksuba come from the first husband? Because the second husband was makned to him from Hashem. Unless there is no Ksuba, then the second husband would be obligated. It says the Mishnah, a concept which we've seen quoted before. Now, of course, we'll go a bit deeper. Says the mitzvah begadol liyabim. Who has the mitzvah? Who is the one that is supposed to do Yibam? The Gadol, the oldest brother. Loi Ratzav, he does not want. Mahalchan HaKolachim, we go and ask all the other brothers. Loi Ratu, Chayzin Etz Gadol, if he does not want, then we go back to the Gadol of Imrim Loi, and we tell him, Alecha mitzvah, Yabim, you have the mitzvah, either do Chalitza or do Yibam. Tala bikatan achiyigdal. Let's see, the brother says, wait, there's a younger brother, wait for him to become a gadol, maybe he'll do Yibam or Chalitza. Or he says, wait, there's another brother overseas, maybe he'll do Yibam or Chalitza. Or perhaps there is a Cherish or a Shaita, which we'll see in the Gemara. Exactly what that means, says the Gemara, Ein Shaimim Lai. We don't listen to his tainos to wait for the younger brother, wait for the brother to return from overseas. No. Elohim Lai Alecha Mitzvah. You have the mitzvah do Chalitza or Yibam. So says the Gemara, let's go a little bit deeper. What is this concept of the mitzvah begadol? Itmar biyas katan v'chalitza gadol bligbar v'yichon Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. When we have a situation, we have a gadol and we have a katan, and Rashi here very importantly points out it does not mean, Rashi on the second wide line says I katan lav katan mamishu. Doesn't mean an actual minor. Why? Because a katan can't do Chalitza and Yibam. Why? Because we're afraid maybe he's not going to be able to have children. Rather, what it means over here is that it means a younger brother. So says the Gemara, when we have a situation of a younger brother who wants to do Yibam, or an older brother who wants to do Chalitza, what comes first? Which of course goes to the crux of the Shaila, is the mitzvah of Begadol. We want the Gadol to get involved at any cost, or no, or is there a Maila, of course, to do Yibam? So says the Gemara, Pligabar Rabbi Yechon Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chadam Rabbi Yeskatan Adiva, Chadam Chalitza Gadol Adifa. Machlaikes explains the Gemara, Man, Dam Rabbi Yeskatan Adifa. Why? The mitzvah be Yibam, because then you're fulfilling the Yibam, you're trying to maintain the brother's name, you're getting married to have children. Man, Dam Chalitza Gadol Adifa. Why? B'makam Gadol When there's a gadol here, no one else matters. That's what the Torah teaches us. When the Torah teaches us that it goes after the gadol, what that shows us is that when he is willing to do something, no one else has to say it all. And that's going to be the machlekes over here between Rav Yechon and Shub and Levi. Does the katan's bia come before the gadol's chalitza or not? And now, of course, in classical Gemara form, we're going to have a bunch of rayas. Says the Gemara, Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Lo yiratza, if they do not want, if the older brother doesn't want to get involved, we go to other brothers. Says the Gemara, my lab, what did it mean lo yiratza? He doesn't want. What does he not want? My lab lo yiratza liyabim elulachleitz. Seemingly we think the Mishnah means he doesn't want to do yibum and rather only do chalitza. And vikatani, what did the Mishnah say? Go ask the other brothers. Shma mina bias katan adiva. We see, go and find another brother to do yibum before we allow the older brother to do chalitza. Says the Gemara, of course, the classical teretz lie, that's not what it means. The Mishnah means the Mishnah means older brothers want to do anything. That's when we go to the other brothers. Ask the Gemara, let's continue the Mishnah for what you just said. When it said that translates as he doesn't want to do anything. Now follow through the Mishnah and see if that's going to work. And the Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said, and if the brothers don't want to do anything either, then we go back to the gadol. So if the do not want to do anything translates to do not want to do yibum or chalitza, then the Mishnah has to continue with the same translation. Says the Gemara, why would we go back to the gadol? We should go. We're going back to the gadol to force and do yibum or chalitza. Let the younger brothers do it. If there's nothing greater about the older brother, younger brother, if there's no yibum happening, so why are we going back to the older brothers? Again, if lo yiratza means he doesn't want to do yibum or chalitza, then we continue down the train to the younger brothers. So if they don't want to either, we should just force them. What's the point of going back to the older brother? Explains the Gemara. No, came with the mitzvah. Leo, Didei Ramya, since he has the mitzvah, Didei Kaifinan, we force him rather than forcing the younger brothers. Says the Gemara, great. Tanan, now we flip it around. If he says, wait for the younger brother till he grows older, Ein Shaimin Lo, we don't listen to him. VBS Katanadifa, says the Gemara, but if the younger brother doing Bia is better, why don't we wait for him? We should wait, perhaps he'll do yibum. So what do we see? We see there's no difference. We can let the older brother do chalitza. Says the Gemara, 1 minute. Based on what you're saying, the Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said, if he says, I have a brother overseas, we also don't wait for him. We should wait for him to do chalitza. Elo, what do we see from the Mishnah of the fact we're not waiting for the cut to do yibum, we're not waiting for the gadol? We don't wait for everyone, the mitzvahs in front of us, we just try to get it taken care of. Says the Gemara as we turn over to Lamites Amid Breeze, is the Amri, we have an Ikad Amri, in which we flip around this machlekes between Rav Yechon and Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Lamites Amid Breeze. If there's someone willing to yibam, everyone agrees, both Rav Yechon and Rav Yeshua ben Levi agrees, he comes first. Keep ligi, what's the machlekes? Bechalitzas katan. The question is, if a younger brother is the one that is willing to do chalitza, and this is the machlokes, chalitzas katan v'chalitzas gadol. Not that we have a debate between chalitza versus yibam. No, then everyone would agree yibam wins. The debate is between chalitza of an older versus a younger brother. One says when it comes to chalitza, everyone is equal. What's the basis of the machlokes? For simple, the mitzvah begadol, that's the easy way. Ve'edok, yeah, I mean the mitzvah begadol is only linyan yibam, linyan chalitza, ki adadi ninu, it's going to be equal. Now says the Gemara Tanan, basically whatever, of course, was a kasha before is a raya. Now we have a raya from the Mishnah. Lo yiratzu, said in the Mishnah, if the younger brothers don't want, what do we do? Chayzun eitzel gadol, we go back to the first brother. My lab, what does lo yiratzu mean? Liyabim elalach, like they're agreeing to do chalitza, and yet chayzun eitzel gadol. So why do we have a raya? We have a raya that when it comes to chalitza, the younger brothers do chalitza. We say no. We chayzrin to the older brother. We say that even with regard to chalitza, there's an adifas, there's something greater about going to the older brother. Says the Gemara, lo no raya, lo yiratu, lo lachloit, v'lo liyabim. What does lo yiratu mean? Neither to do yibum or chalitza. The Kavasah continues the Gemara and asks, Kabe gadol, so now play it out. Lo yiratu, when the Mishnah began, it said the gadol does not want. Lo yiratu means lo lachloit, lo liyabim. But if that's true, amai elo amai chayzin eitz a gadol. If that's true, then why, if the younger brothers refuse, we're going back to the gadol? Why don't we just force lemechafe? We're going back to older brothers to force him, force the younger brothers. Explains the Gemara again, keeping the mitzvah lady day, Rami lidei kaifinon, he had the mitzvah, so therefore we're going to force him. So we try to bring a raya both ways, no raya. And now we go to the second part of the Mishnah. Tashema, if he says, wait, there's an older brother overseas, maybe you do even we don't listen to him. What's the if chalitza of older brother is better, we should wait for him. Maybe we'll do chalitza. Says the Gemara, based on what you're saying. But what did the Mishnah say? If he says I have a younger brother, wait for him to grow older, do yibam. What do we see? Clearly, we do not wait whenever the mitzvah is in front of us. And therefore, that's the end of the kashas and the rayas, both to Rav Yechon, Rav Shub, and Levi, in both Lishonis. Says the Gemara, Tanan, also we learned in a Mishnah, or about 20 lines down, Lamed base. First one line is Tanan. Mitzvah Yibam Kodam is the mitzvah chalitza. A Mishnah. The Mishnah says Yibam comes before chalitza. Barishaina. Originally, Shem Miskam the Shem Mitzvah. That was only the beginning. If you remember, we spoke with this back all the way back at the beginning of the Masechta, that you have to have the right kavana to do Yibam, because there's a potential Isser Ishis Ach. So when does that Isser fall off? When you do Yibam, when you do a Mitzvah. But if you have ulterior motives, then maybe not. So says the Gemara, that was Barishaina when they have kavana. But Ach, so Shem Miskam the Shem Mitzvah, Amru Mitzvah Chalitz Kadam Mitzvah Mitzvah Yibam, says the Gemara, the halacha changes. Because people do not have the right kavana, therefore chalitza should come first. And Omar Rav, and says Rav, but in kaifin, even though chalitza comes first, we don't force him. A bit of machlekes, we showed him how to learn this line, but perhaps the simple way of learning is in kaifin, that even though if someone wants to do, we let them do whatever they want to do. As the Gemara now elaborates, if you want to do chalitza, if you want to do chalitza, if you want to do yibam, it's up to you. You could choose whatever you like. Why? Because it says in the Torah of him, Torah says if you don't want, you do chalitza. It's teaching me if you want to do yibam, it's up to you to choose whichever you want. And explains the Gemara about Rav Yehuda Savar Ein Kaifin. Even Rav Yehuda says we don't force them to do chalitza. How do I know that? Mid'atkin Rav Yehuda Begita, from the fact that Rav Yehuda instituted that when you write the Begita, the Chalitza, when you write a Chalitza document, what do you write in the document? The following wording. Eich Ploinis Bas Ploinis Akarvis, this so-and-so man came in front of us, Yos Ploni Yevama Kadmai Lebeidina, they came in front of us, Tebezdin, Vishtamidinu, Ta'achua Demisna, May Abba Niu. And we recognize that what? The paternal brother was Nifter of Amri Lei. And we, Bezin, said to him, If you want to do Yibam, do Yibam. If you don't want to do Yibam, what should you do? Stick out your foot. Diyamino, your right foot. Diyamino, and he stuck out his right foot. And she removes the shoe from his foot. And she has to spit in front of him. We're learning the Chalitza process here also. She has to spit. The Bezin can actually see the spit. Alar on the ground. What else do they say? And they would read over that which it says in the Parsha B'Seifa Araisa regarding the Moshe, the mitzvah of Chalitza. So what do we see? We see clearly that they would write, you have choice to do Yibam or Chalitza. And we'll conclude with the Gemara that says, Ishtamidu, what does that word mean? Who is the one that tells us that the brother died? Machlekes, if we need Eidim or even a Karva or an Isha, anyone can testify that the brother was nifter. It's not a proper eidos. We'll pick it up from the two dots the next year. Mirza Hashem.